is the inalienable right of every human being, and it is my firm conviction that everyone should have access to quality health services when and where they need them, without any financial hardship. Health of all people is a fundamental issue for peace and security in our world, but we also must know that unequal development is a common danger for all. Let me start with good news though. There have been significant progress made in global health over the past couple of decades, and many countries have taken the crucial step to make health services universally accessible to their citizens. Yet, progress has been too slow and uneven. The number of global under 5 deaths dropped down to 5.2 million in 2019 from 12.5 million in 1990. Since then, however, we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in major disruptions to health services that threaten to undo decades of hard-won progress. COVID-19 has dramatically exposed existing vulnerabilities in our health systems, in high, middle, and low-income countries alike, in fact, irrespective of nations' wealth. It has highlighted shortages in the health workforce and medical equipment and supplies, but also inadequate investments in infrastructure. Countries worldwide are experiencing disruptions in child and maternal health services. Newborn babies could be at much higher risk of dying as a result of that. While the virus does not discriminate, its impacts do, and often they are hitting hardest the old, the poor, those with chronic diseases or poor living conditions. COVID-19 has also caused interruptions in immunization programs, threatening the resurgence of infectious diseases such as measles, diphtheria, polio, yellow fever, and others that are preventable by the vaccines that are available today. WHO estimates that approximately 94 million children under 5 years of age are at risk of missing measles vaccinations. Mass immunization campaigns in more than 60 countries have been delayed or cancelled. This is very dangerous. Without maintaining essential health services, the burden of morbidity and mortality from preventable health threats may even exceed that of COVID-19. So in order not to lose ground on the significant gains made over the last 2 decades, countries must sustain essential sexual, reproductive, maternal, newborn, child, and adolescent health services aimed at specific age groups across the life course. Not sustaining these services will have a major impact on women's and newborns' health and survival, especially in low and middle income countries, but also in the settings of fragility, conflict, and violence. Let's look at the top global causes of death. It is clear that so-called non-communicable diseases, that is, non-infectious diseases, cause more deaths annually than all other diseases combined. It illustrates an increase from 2000, specifically accounting for 70%, and it is further will be increasing towards 2030 if nothing is being done. And mental health is of particular concern here. In recent years, there has been increasing acknowledgement of the important role of mental health in achieving global development goals. Depression is one of the leading causes of disability. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among 15 to 29 years old. Now, people with severe mental health conditions die prematurely, as much as 2 decades earlier, due to other quite preventable physical conditions. And this is unacceptable. So food security and nutrition is also an important area. And the COVID-19 crisis has shone a spotlight on food and health like no other crisis has done in living memory. It has revealed the fragility of our health and food systems. It illustrates how the health of ecosystems and animals can have a direct bearing on human health and well-being. The economic and social disruption that has been caused by the pandemic is an unprecedented challenge to public health. and food systems as well, and has already had a devastating effect for millions of people now falling into extreme poverty. People who already suffer because of health inequities, including the poor, women and children, those living in fragile or conflict-affected states, ethnic minorities, and indigenous groups. They are all impacted by both the virus and the containment measures the government have implemented in their countries. A robust and diverse food supply is an essential part of the health and nutrition response to COVID-19. Another big area is antimicrobial resistance, which is a phenomenon that occurs when bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites change over time and no longer respond to medicines, making infections harder to treat and also increasing the risk of disease spread, severe illness, and death. Antimicrobial resistance is rising at an alarming rate in countries of all income levels, as common infections are becoming more difficult to treat and life-saving medical procedures are more riskier to perform. Antimicrobial resistance threatens gains in maternal and neonatal health, in tuberculosis, malaria, in safe surgery, HIV, in cancer treatment, and so on. Antimicrobial resistance in food and agriculture also threatens food systems, food safety, livelihoods, and economies at large. According to estimates that drug-resistant diseases already cause at least 700,000 deaths globally a year, and if no action is taken, it is predicted to lead to 10 million deaths a year and a cumulative economic impact of $100 trillion by 2050. No health system will be sustainable without access to affordable antibiotics that work. And the problem is aggravated because the pipeline for the development of new classes of antibiotics is almost empty today. Medicine will cost more, treatments will take longer, and cures will be less certain. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown the devastating impact of hard-to-treat infections and the ease with which infections can spread and threaten global health security. In this connection, it's worth mentioning One Health approach. Despite the human suffering caused by COVID-19, the changes are causing many to reconsider what is most important in our societies and our relationship with the planet. Protecting the natural environment is an essential health intervention. Reducing deforestation, managing the wildlife trade, integrated surveillance of infection in wildlife, livestock, and humans. All these actions reduce the risk of another COVID-19 crisis, which the world cannot afford. While the human cost of COVID-19 has been too high already, people have noticed the improvements in air and water quality, reduction in traffic, etc., resulting from lockdowns, and will want to preserve this during the recovery. Health is a strong argument for Green New Deals that prioritize clean and modern rather than polluting economic activity. The pandemic has shown that we must build integrated preparedness and response approaches, such as One Health, which recognizes that human health and well-being is very closely connected to the health of wildlife, domesticated animals, and our shared environment. And we must take One Health concept to an entirely new level, and that is that we must make it not just a concept, it must be translated into systems that keep people safe in countries and address the full range of issues that affect the relationship between the humans, animals, and the planet, including deforestation, intensive agriculture, pollution, climate change, and so on. Let me say a couple of words about gender. Access to health services for millions of women remain limited. In part, this is linked to an emphasis on employment-based health financing, which excludes women who tend to work in informal sectors. as well as typically being the primary and usually unpaid caregivers in their household. Women also make up to 70% of health and social workers, but they are paid less than men and have fewer leadership and decision-making roles in the health sector. Non-communicable diseases affect women inequitably and more than most people think. Non-communicable diseases are now responsible for 2 in every 3 deaths among women each year. This is expected to increase substantially in the coming decades, especially in low and middle income countries. There are, however, regional differences in mortality which reflect disparities in access to preventive services, diagnosis, and treatment. For example, the breast cancer 5-year survival rate is close to 90% in North America and below 60% in many low-income countries. So women comprise only 25% of leadership positions in health and care sectors, despite of making up to 70% of the workforce. And this only accounts for formal sector. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has compounded the gaps in gender parity and the empowerment of women across the board. And that is despite of notable examples of absolutely remarkable female leadership, from heads of state to scientists working on vaccines development, and despite of being majority of the frontline workers. The health, well-being, and needs of half of the world's population cannot be threatened and cannot be treated as an afterthought. Investing in women's health is a moral and smart imperative. It saves lives, reduces poverty, increases productivity, and stimulates economic growth with up to 9-fold return on investment. COVID-19 has reinforced the existing evidence that investments in health have long-term returns, while underinvestment has potential large-scale social and economic implications. The COVID-19 pandemic can be the catalyst increased investment in health sector, but also towards stronger multi-sectoral policies led by a whole of the government approach. Improving health and well-being for all and reducing health inequalities and ensuring no one is left behind will bring wider economic and social and environmental benefits to all of us. Personally, I am committed to this path. Allow me a moment to touch on the 3 overarching principles that, in my view, should drive the world in addressing these challenges: equity, innovation, and impact. Equity essentially being about leaving no one behind. Innovation, championing new ways of doing things, exploring advancements such as digital health technologies, for example, to improve access, reduce cost, and increase efficiency of the system, and ultimately to reduce inequalities in health. And impact, reaching the greatest number for maximum results. Impact is about making a visible and demonstrable difference to the lives of the citizens, especially the vulnerable, the underserved, and unreached. It is with greatest conviction that I say that these guiding principles, equity, innovation, and impact, are important to how our tomorrow will be, not just in the near future, but also the legacy we leave behind for our children and their children. Coincidentally, as I am recording this video while being in self-isolation due to COVID-19, my granddaughter is being born today. And while it gives me enormous happiness and excitement, it also makes me think of what planet I will leave to her and what planet will she leave to her children. We are all responsible. Today, there are 1.2 billion people worldwide between the ages of 15 and 24, the largest generation of youth in history. Close to 90% of them live in developing countries. They represent not only the largest generation in history, but also the most interconnected and the most educated one. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, however, young people were confronted with significant systemic obstacles in claiming their rights and achieving their full potential, including barriers in accessing information, education, health, decent employment, and other basic services. They are disproportionately affected by the socioeconomic impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, and together with future generations, stand to experience the worst impacts of the climate emergency and also biodiversity crisis. Despite being more connected and active online than older adults, the digital divide is an additional barrier for participation, with only 30% of young people in least developed countries, for instance, have access to the internet. The same is true of education and income opportunities. To change that, we must ensure meaningful participation of young people in decision-making regarding affairs that affect their present and future. So today, my message is addressed to young people, future of our planet. And the message is to dream big of a new world, of hope and optimism, and take the road less trodden to address the challenges I have mentioned today. Champion your cause and make your voice heard, and I promise you will make a difference. An American physician, Ian Smith, said, "The happiest people are those with the fewest regrets. It is not because they have succeeded in everything that they have tried. Rather, they are happier because they put forth the effort, win or lose, and try to make their thoughts and dreams a reality." I have always done that. And for a comprehensive recovery strategy, we need to fully incorporate the experiences, and the leadership qualities of women and the young people for an inclusive and sustainable approach to recover better. Let's just do that. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sir Charles. Next up, we have a question from Roof for Dr. Nata Menabde. The question is, what can each of us start doing today in order to promote the goals you evoked, especially the critical goal of increasing equity in terms of access to health care and education? Ms. Menabde?
Yes. First, I think wherever we are, we have to be very conscious about those goals and ask ourselves questions. How is the situation in our own settings? Because inequities are everywhere. And if we want to change them, we need to target them, and we need to know what the baselines are and what we want to achieve. So this is very demonstrable in every area. Like, ask yourselves questions, what your populations in your countries have access to in terms of health services, for example. Can all the people afford the medicines they have to get? Or can all the people get the vaccine, for example? Vaccine equity is a very best example of what we are facing globally now. Some countries are getting access to all the vaccines, and others are getting access to very limited number of vaccines. So in some countries, we can't even vaccinate health workers and so on. So I believe that in every settings, there are situations in which things are not equally applicable to all. So we can always do something to change that by asking questions, by looking at the policies that we have in place, by taking proactive steps to redesign those policies and make sure that whatever is available for all, because we are all in this together, and that's ultimately an issue. If we don't solve problem of each other, we are not going to solve problem globally. And it's not true that you can get your vaccine and stay safe, for example, because you see with the virus circulating around, for example, of COVID-19, it mutates, and when it mutates, the available vaccines may even not be any longer effective to prevent severe diseases and so on. So it is important for us all that we think locally, but also understand the global context, a bigger context context of our cities, context of our countries, context of global needs. And I think that's a responsibility of teachers as well to teach and explain and make students aware of the implications of inequality, because inequality does have impact on everything we do. And I believe that there is scope, from little scope to great scope, everywhere we act today. Social media is a great resource, of course, for many things, and it has been indispensable in the times of COVID, I would say. However, social media is something one has to watch carefully and use carefully as well, because on one hand, we should not be overwhelmed and looking for all the solutions in social media. And we have seen our kids spending too much time engaged in social media activities. It's good to a certain extent, but it can be also quite dangerous because it detracts attention. And very importantly, social media is a source of a lot of misinformation, and that we have to keep in mind. And there is the anti-vax campaigns are going on social media, many other things. So there are commercial interests involved in that. There are many things which we have to watch carefully. So we in the UN at large and in WHO also are very much engaged into combating the infodemics, what we call, because it is a lot of information which is not substantiated with the adequate evidence, and it is misleading people and it is pushing them into acting wrongly. So I would say social media is a good resource. We have to counterbalance it by putting in it evidence-based, correct information so people can look at that. And that's a big effort. And this is something we are not all used to. So I think we have partnered with Google, with FaceTime, with Twitter, with everybody to make sure that the COVID-19 related information, correct information, actual information, science-based and evidence-based information is available. But it's a battle. So let's take good use of the positive features of social media, which is offers to us, but also make sure that we are able to counterbalance the misinformation which is coming through social media.
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Dr.
thank you.
Menabde.
So maybe to make a small summary in French, pour faire un petit résumé en français. Alors sur les réseaux sociaux, il y a de très bonnes choses, mais il y a aussi des choses qui sont des fake news. Et il faut vraiment qu'il y ait, comme le disait Madame Menabde, le United Nations, donc les Nations Unies ou d'autres organisations qui soient là pour y faire attention, faire en sorte qu'il y ait un contenu qui soit vérifié et qui empêche, par exemple, la campagne anti-vaccin pour le Covid, un exemple qui a été donné. Donc voilà, un grand merci pour votre participation et vraiment, c'était quand même assez impressionnant de pouvoir vous avoir parmi nous. Donc merci à nos conférenciers.
Et n'oublions pas nos sponsors. Un grand merci aujourd'hui à la ville de Reims, la Société Générale, les Galeries Barthou et aussi notre université Sciences Po.
Bon, je pense que cette fois-ci, c'est vraiment tout. On n'a rien oublié? Do you want to add something, CP? Un dernier mot?
I think that's everything, so I'll just end on this note. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So we're going to leave before we become your villains. See you at 6 p.m. Bye.
Bye.